Its themes the well-planned and executed military-style attack on a diplomatic facility in Benghazi was the political equivalent of a devastating improvised explosive device on the myth of Obama's record as Commander-in-Chief. Thanks to intrepid investigative reporting, notably by Brett Baer and Catherine Herridge at Fox News, Aaron Klein at WorldNet Daily, and Claire Lopez at RadicalIslam.org, and thanks to information developed by congressional investigators, the mystery is beginning to unravel, with regard specifically to what happened that night and the reason for the subsequent clumsy official cover-up. The evidence suggests that the Obama administration has not simply been engaging, legitimating, enriching, and emboldening Islamists who have now taken over or are ascendant in much of the Middle East. Starting in March 2011, when American diplomat Christopher Stevens was designated the liaison to the opposition in Libya, the Obama administration has been arming them, including jihadists like Abdul Hakim Belhaj, the leader of the al-Qaeda franchise known as the Libyan Islamic Fighting Group. Once Gaddafi was overthrown, Chris Stevens was appointed as the ambassador to the new Libya, run by Belhaj and his friends. Not surprisingly, one of the most important priorities for someone in that position would be to try to find and secure the immense amounts of armaments that had been cached by the dictator around the country and systematically looted during and after the Libyan Revolution. One of the places in Libya most awash with such weapons, in the most dangerous of hands, is Benghazi. On a particularly risky day, with no security to speak of, and despite now copiously documented concerns about his own safety and that of his subordinates, it now appears that Ambassador Stevens was in Benghazi for another priority mission, sending arms recovered from the former Libyan regime's stocks to the opposition in Syria. As in Libya, the insurgents are known to include al-Qaeda and other Sharia-adherent supremacist groups, including none other than Abdul Hakim Belhaj. Fox News has chronicled how the El Intisar, a Libyan flag vessel carrying 400 tons of cargo, docked in the Turkish port of Iskenderun on September 6th. It reportedly supplied both humanitarian assistance and arms, including deadly SA-7 man-portable surface-to-air missiles, apparently destined for Islamists, again, including al-Qaeda elements in Syria. What cries out for further investigation and debate in the remaining days of this presidential election is whether this shipment was part of a larger, covert Obama effort to transfer weapons to our enemies, weapons that could make the Iran-Contra scandal, to say nothing of Operation Fast and Furious, pale by comparison. Investigative journalist Aaron Klein has reported that the consulate in Benghazi actually was no such thing. He observes that while administration officials have done nothing to correct that oft-repeated characterization of the facility where the murderous attack on Ambassador Stevens and his colleagues was launched, instead, they call it simply a diplomatic mission. And what Klein describes as a shabby, nondescript building which lacked any major public security presence was, according to an unnamed Middle Eastern security official, routinely used by Stevens and others to coordinate with the Turkish, Saudi, and Qatari governments on supporting the insurgencies in the Middle East, most prominently the rebels opposing Assad's regime in Syria. We know that Stevens' last official act was to hold such a meeting with an unidentified Turkish diplomat. Presumably, the conversation involved additional arms shipments to al-Qaeda and its allies in Syria. But it may also have involved getting more jihadi fighters there as well. After all, Klein reported last month that, according to sources in Egyptian security, our ambassador to Libya was playing a central role in recruiting jihadists to fight Bashar al-Assad's regime in Syria. It gets worse. Last week, Center for Security Policy senior fellow and former career CIA officer Claire Lopez observed that there were 2 large warehouse-type buildings associated with the so-called consulate, whose purpose has yet to be disclosed. As their contents were raided in the course of the attack, we may never know for sure whether they housed, and were known by the local jihadis to house, arms, perhaps administered by the 2 former SEALs killed along with Ambassador Stevens. What we do know is that the New York Times, one of the most slavishly pro-Obama publications in the country, reported on October 14th, 2012, that most of the arms shipped at the behest of Saudi Arabia and Qatar to supply Syrian rebel groups fighting the government of Bashar al-Assad are going to hardline Islamic jihadists and not the more secular opposition groups that the West wants to bolster. In short, it seems President Obama has been engaged in gun walking on a massive scale. The effect has been to equip America's enemies to wage jihad, not only against regimes it once claimed were our friends, but inevitably against us and our allies as well. That would explain his administration's desperate and now failing bid to mislead the voters through the serial deflections of Benghazigate. This is Frank Gaffney. Thanks so much for listening.